All right. Well, welcome back to Defense Academy. We are recording, just so you guys know. I'm not sure if Ben or Jorge mentioned that. So you will, in addition to having access to the slides, you will have access to this material later to kind of re-listen to the material, get yourself really familiarized with that. Really great first presentation because that was a lot. That was a lot of really great information. So Jorge and Chase and Jeremy, so thank you guys so much for giving us a great overview of what contracting is all about. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm Jessica Steinhoff. I work now for Capital Factory. I help run the San Antonio team. It's a division of the CDI, but it's down at Techport. It's a new facility for Capital Factory, but I was in the Air Force for 21 years. I did 9 years in finance, and I did 12 years in government contracting. So I actually worked for Jorge, and that was how I came to Capital Factory. They sponsored me for my fellowship, so I was lucky enough for them to hire me right in February. So that's why I am now here, working in my first grown-up job. So I would like to welcome the business development panel to the stage. And I'm going to give the stage or the floor to our lovely guests so that they can, excuse me, getting tongue-tied, so they can introduce themselves and tell you guys a little bit about themselves. So over to you, Paul.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Norwood. I work with Deloitte here in the Capital Factory on the 5th floor. I live at the intersection of technology, media, telecommunications, and national security problems. And I come to that position based upon over a little under a 30-year career on active duty in the U.S. Army. And coming back and realizing, both through my military experience and through the experience I've seen inside of a largely commercial firm like Deloitte, that what we're seeing is the commercial entities driving the technology, media, telecommunications, those unique capabilities that are out there. And that, quite frankly, the folks that are farthest behind are those in the national security arena. And in my world, we call that the defense, security, and justice industry. That we say things like best practice, and you'll hear people inside the Department of Defense say best practice. I used to say that, and then having been out with a commercial partner or two inside of Deloitte, coming back from a Fortune 10 type of technology firm, they said, well, Paul, really the only people who think that's a best practice is the DoD. For everybody else, it's just a practice, and we've been doing it a while. So hopefully today we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about what Jorge and the team talked about up front, which was kind of giving the rules of the road. And what we want to talk about here is, are you racing or are you taking a Sunday drive? And whether you're racing or you're taking a Sunday drive, both are awesome, and I've done both in my life. But you need to make a decision as a startup whether that juice is worth the squeeze. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Awesome. Thank you. And over to you.
Hey everyone, thanks for taking the time to be here. My name is Andrew Thompson, and I am the head of product for OpsLab. On the DoD side of things, we are working on automating the schedule builds for pilots, both at the FTU and AETC side. So we're currently working through that. We are under contract, prime contract. We moved out of SIPR Phase 2 to Phase 3 at Luke. And we currently have traction and some funding from Minot to see if we can create a solution for different MDSs, and we're also working at DM as well. There are a couple other side projects that we're working on in tandem with that, but that's where the current funding is coming from and how we're sustaining our model. We actually started on the commercial airline space, doing both the schedule build and disruption reflows. Once we kind of got the algorithm and everything sorted on that end, we looked, where is the next space that we could apply this application and actually get traction? And there's a whole backstory to all that, but that's currently where we are in the problems we're looking to solve.
Awesome. Andrew, if you could help us to kind of piggyback a little bit about what Paul was saying about the juice being worth the squeeze, can you tell us your, entry point into the government and, a little bit about your experience on how entry into what that felt like?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So like we said, we started on the commercial airline space, but being in Capital Factory and just coming to some of these things, we got introduced into the DIU and started getting some traction out at Luke because they were looking at some similar problems that they were having with trying to get their students through the coursework on time. Basically, they're trying to get people through B course and such in 5 or 6 months, but it's taking 9 months. Like, it's never getting through on time. And the problem that we saw is that, number one, there was just like bad expectations up front, right? Like if there's a 0% chance that you're getting people through on time, something's wrong fundamentally. And so we started at the highest level saying, one, can we rebuild the schedule from a 6-month or 1-year viewpoint all the way down to the reflow side, which we were more comfortable with because we've been doing that on the commercial space. So once we kind of got into that space and started understanding it from that perspective, we actually started just going and visiting there. And that meant getting our hands dirty, right? Like getting in there with the users, the actual people in the scheduling shop. And that was people that were contractors, like civilians, to IPs, all the way up to the DOs. And once we started that whole process of sitting with them, we got buy-in because they saw that we cared, right? And we, not to call anyone out on that side, is just like they hadn't seen people come in and ask these questions and really get their hands dirty in a long time. Whereas us on the enterprise side, anytime you're bidding for a contract, you're going up against 50 other really capable people. But on the military side, on the DoD side at least, with the Air Force, they were dealing with products that were legacy products and had been in place, and they hadn't talked to anyone when they had issues. They didn't know who to turn to. So it was kind of a breath of fresh air for us to actually show up and physically be there and kind of hear the gripes that got buy-in.
Yeah. So do you think you found your champion early on, and that was your entry point?
We did. We worked with the SparkCell lead out at Luke, and we got introduced to them through an MIT team that we were working with on some AI application on the commercial side. And through that, it was a very ambitious captain out there who's moved on to Nellis right now. And that really did get us to the point where we got trust really quickly because they were respected out there even though they were younger, and they started kind of introducing us to the right players.
The serendipitous connection.
Yeah.
Sorry, had to go there. No, that's great. So your first government contract was it a CIBR?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are, as you guys learned in the first panel, that is one of many in the contracting cone, but that is a great tool, a great entry point into government non-dilutive capital, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But that is a great way to get in there. And then we talked about spark cells, but knowing the right person and kind of being that champion is definitely a great way to get in there and get your hands dirty. So any other tips you could kind of give folks that are out in the audience that you felt were, your success rate kind of, because you guys had your phase 1, and then now you've kind of graduated to phase 2, and then you've found your way from Luke to Davis-Monthan and beyond, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, for us, it really was about showing up and finding that hair on fire problem. We didn't go in there expecting to be great at what we did in the beginning, but we sat and listened. And we did about 1.5 years worth of discovery calls. It took a ton of notes and just continued to show up and really understand at its at the core what the issue was. That was the main thing, really, is just continuing to show up. And then that the beauty about the Air Force for us, and like one of the crux of the problems for us, is that people move around a lot. So, you have to make sure that handoff is seamless whenever your champion from Luke moves to Nellis. But if you can get that handoff, that's beautiful, because then you have the champion that's going around, and there's kind of a grassroots movement. So for us, that kind of biz dev has come a little bit more organically, because you don't see that in the enterprise space a lot. Like, people talk, but it's not quite as powerful if you have these people moving around to physical basis. So now we're just kind of organically moving around the country and even around the world with some of the bases we're speaking to.
And I think I chatted, so I do some mentorship hours specifically on CIBR for Capital Factory, and I think I mentored with OpsLab with Aaron. And you guys solve a few different types of problems in the scheduling world, and I think you had someone within the government space come and ask you to solve maybe a couple different problems all at one time. So at one juncture, you were kind of being asked to solve a couple problems at once, right, for the Air Force or for a couple clients. What did you guys end up doing? Did you guys take, were you trying to solve one problem, three problems? What did you guys end up doing? Did you guys focus on the one, or did you try to go after 6 problems at once? I don't remember him circling around with me.
Yeah, lowest hanging fruit.
Okay. So.
That's it.
So, and why I bring that up is, say, sometimes we kind of get squirrel, right, as a startup, because, you know, you think you're like, oh my gosh, I have 7 customers because the Air Force was my first customer, and you're going to try to attack all of them. And for you guys, I think just staying laser focused on that one was really what was successful for y'all.
It was, and also thinking about it, like when we're doing, you know, the database architecture and things like that, is building it in a configurable way, because we did that like with the rules engine and the solver for the commercial application. Like if you go from, say, Republic to, you know, Viva to SkyWest, there are different applications within each of those, but you may build, you know, an 80% solution, and then when you're going to a different airline, you're only going to need to, you know, spend a year worth of like deployment and configuration versus another like 4 years. So for us, looking at it from, you know, a laser focused viewpoint, but also being conscientious of how we lay the foundation, so that when we do go to another MDS and you're going from you know, an F-16 to an F-35, that's not a big deal. But if you're going from an F-35 to a B-52, the use case is quite large. So just making sure that we were staying focused on, you know, the scheduling and reflow part, but so that it would be applicable to all the MDSs, so that we could roll out Air Force-wide if, you know, we had the opportunity.
And I think one of the things I remember Aaron talking about was that commercial capability, right? Was in your case, not only were you able to do the scheduling for, you know, the Air Force client, but you could go to airlines. So if you stayed and you went to like 6 different airframes at once, you were steering to, you were going to take away your developers from your commercial.
Right.
So staying focused on your 2 airframes allowed you to kind of stay in the lane where you could kind of keep that 80-20. And I think that obviously was valuable for y'all. So it kind of just foot stomps what the first presentation, you know, kind of reiterates. So, Paul, can we maybe open it up to you on what you've seen has been successful with, you know, your experience for, you know, development and finding maybe more startups that have been successful in development and, you know, in your neck of the woods?
Sure.
What's
So
worked
just
for y'all?
just a couple of things here. We've talked SIBRs a lot, you know, Small Business Innovation Research Grants. I love a good SIBR, right? Don't confuse SIBR, as the previous panel talked about, with actually scaling and getting that big giant bag of gold doubloons, right? There is no big giant bag of gold at the end of the SIBR rainbow. That is just a technique. That is a program which is supposed to help you develop out your capability to the point where the government sees whether it has interest in it or not, right? And always keep in mind, there's various ways to say it, but the way that I look at it and try to explain to folks, a client with a problem, that doesn't equal business. A client with a problem with budget doesn't equal business. A client with budget, with a problem, and a transaction vehicle, that equals business, right? So as you start to think about what it is you're trying to achieve, you have to understand each section of that equation so that you can then actually not just go and have great meetings, right, which are awesome, and who doesn't love a good meeting, but I'll offer in a startup world your most valuable resources, time, money, and then quite frankly, your IP. And if you're wasting your time, or you're wasting time in applying and working towards some sort of opportunities that don't actually have any result in revenue, are you really progressing? Or does it just feel like you're progressing? So just be very, very cautious on those kinds of engagements. You know, I would offer that if you think through the very first question, which I said up front, which is the juice worth the squeeze? Right? I will just tell you, I mean, I'm not giving you the rules up here. I'm just telling you what I've experienced. The government is a terrible customer. Really is. Going to pay you late. Going to do a lot of bureaucracy. Better go get your cage code. Better get your DUNS code, right? I mean, we're going to put down so many requirements on you as a startup And then those barriers just rise and rise. And so you have to decide, why is it I want to do business with the government? And I'm thinking local, state, or federal, right? A lot of folks in here are just focused on federal. Local, state, a lot of times, a lot of resources, a lot of access, a lot of problems. Are you focusing enough time and attention there? But if you're gonna stick with federal, and we're gonna do that for simplicity's sake here today, why is it you wanna do it? Is it a channel revenue stream, which is what I just heard? Right? Hey, I'm gonna open up a nice channel revenue stream into the Department of Defense. That's probably not gonna go big, it's not gonna go small, but it's gonna have a nice kind of an annuity there for me, so as my commercial rises and falls, I've got a little bit of base safety net there. That's a solid technique, right? But you also heard on the previous panel, they said, get your commercial traction first, and then go into the Department of Defense. I will tell you, you can go straight into the DoD, but if you're relying upon that source of revenue to be stable for your company at the beginning, that's tough. I'll tell you a couple of other opportunities, and I'll present it from a large firm's perspective. Large firms can be just as difficult, right? I will tell you, I have personal examples where I have got a startup teammate that I love, gone to the marketplace together several times, and every time we do it, they sign a new NDA, and they sign a new teaming agreement. Now, for some firm like myself and some other, I see other large firms in the room who have many, many lawyers on staff. That's just an email. Email goes out, magic happens, teaming agreement, NDAs are generated. But for a startup who might not have counsel on hand, that's about a $400 bill, right? Or they're going to assume risk and just sign it. Think through what it is you're doing when you go to the marketplace, either with a large firm or directly into the marketplace going into the DoD itself. I will tell you, I've seen just as many firms go into that grinder and come out without having had any appreciable revenue, or if they did attain the revenue, they didn't actually have any net profit out of it. And so actually it was a little bit of a loss to them in the marketplace. That can be okay, right? Maybe it is brand plus capability equals market access. And maybe they chose to do something like that because of the brand. They wanted to get branded in that space. That's solid. Can you afford that as a startup? Maybe. I don't know your economics. Is it your capability, right? You've further significantly improved your capability using the SBIR's monies, which is what it's really designed for. And then does that then ultimately give you access to the marketplace beyond a SBIR? Your end state is not SBIR. Let me say it again. Your end state is not SBIR. Your end state is actually being able to scale and transition more broadly, not just into a national security client base, but potentially be able to spread that a little bit more broadly into some other commercial use cases where your margins are going to be much more broad, right? Much better. The last thing I'll kind of offer on this is companies that are very early on in their journey, early stage, let's say pre-seed, maybe seed, maybe at the A. Do you know what you are yet? Are you a product company? Are you a services company? Are you a managed services, software as a service? If you don't know that yet and haven't figured out your product market fit, then you're not ready to really work with a large inside of a defense contracting base, right? You're very hard. I would lastly say that your tactical opportunities become very much the thing that gets you traction and momentum. So general conversations aren't particularly helpful. They may make you feel like you're progressing, but in fact, you're just wasting some of your most precious resources, which is time, okay? So there's a couple of thoughts there on, is the juice worth the squeeze? If it is, you've got great resources in places like Capital Factory, the Small Business Association. Can't tell you the number of times I've talked to entrepreneurs who absolutely didn't want to be called a small business. You absolutely want to be called a small business, right? That is an advantage. That's a superpower that you can have inside of this community, inside of this marketplace. Take advantage of those. You can come to places like Capital Factory to do that. You can find the Small Business Association or agency out there. They can help you with it as well. And then you can come to places like myself, and I also see John O'Grady here, and I see some others in the room. There's a reason that the large companies are here at Capital Factory, right? We want to engage. We're looking for that teammate, that partner that has a product that we lack. And we're going through an internal calculus that says buy, borrow, or build. And build being last, right? If I can do that, maybe you're the right partner we're looking for. Let's get in the marketplace, right? The last thing we say out of that is beyond being able to go to the market together, it is not just simply about being a transactional partner. I think that you see most of the large companies that are here in the Capital Factory, we're here because we care. We want to be inside this ecosystem. We're a part of it. We're doing some of that same kind of thing. You notice I've never said the word innovation to this point. Now, DoD has a lot of wonderful innovation organizations, most of which are represented here inside of the Capital Factory, and I love them. But sometimes we're getting lost behind a word. What we're really looking for is competitive advantage. And you as a startup need to find a client with a problem that has budget and a transaction vehicle. You can do that in your business development and understand a process to make sure you understand whether it's worth your while to pursue or not, you're going to progress in this business. If not, you're going to end up expending a lot of your precious resources for no gain.
That was great, Paul. Thank you so much. And you know, I'll just piggyback on that a little bit and say, in my experience, things that don't work is cold calling your contracting. If you get a contracting officer's phone number, I will tell you that I had my phone number somehow on 182 CBIR contracts at one point. They were the first CBIR contracts that were awarded right out of this building. I don't know how it happened, probably because that was the only phone number that people had. And I just never answered my phone. So it just doesn't work, you know, because like we can't answer the phone that many times, and there's just really no way we're not your champion. So I will say, do not think if you meet a general officer or a colonel at an event that they are going to be the one that has the money and the procurement authority to do whatever they agree to, shake your hand and say, oh yes, I love your product, because they're not the one with the authority to do so. Just like Jorge and Chase mentioned up here, they don't have that authority, even if they shake your hand and say yes, right? You're gonna have to get to that champion, you're gonna have to do your pitch. There's a lot more bureaucracy you have to kind of get through. So just understanding the process is kind of the battle, right? So I would say just understand that you have to kind of go through the wickets and you'll get there, right? And I would say what does work is finding that champion, finding that ecosystem, being a part of Capital Factory. And if you are a part of our ecosystem, which most of you probably are if you're here today, is being a part of some of our VIP tours. I'll put a plug, being the VIP manager, and pitching to some of the VIPs that come through here. A lot of them are DoD or federal partners that are looking for what you have to offer. So if you can get in front of them, we have a lot of them that come through. We have international partners, and they're looking for exactly what you have. So get with Elena, get with myself. My information is, obviously all around. Elena's card is there. And some of y'all I've never seen, and I would love to have you as a part of our VIP process, and you can pitch to those folks, and they'd love to learn about what you guys do. So that's really what works the most, is just getting your name out there through those relationships versus just cold calling. I will tell you another thing that doesn't work is paying someone to put together your capability statement and then just pushing it out via email that goes to contracting officers. So I got tons and tons and tons of emails like that, and I just sent them to my junk. So don't pay somebody to do that.
Can I just kind of dovetail on that just a second?
Yes.
So one of those things you've got out there, I kind of live my life with, understand motivations and assume positive intent, right? That makes me happy. Everybody's thinking they're doing the right thing for you. That's where I start out my life in. There's a lot of folks that will be between you and the client, or you and the contract vehicle, or you and the budget, or you and your capability. Understand their motivation for placing themselves in that chain, and then you have to make a decision. Are they required? I.e., is it law, policy, or regulation that Jorge and the panel in front talked about? And so they're gonna be there whether you figure them out or not. Are they optional? And they're gonna be there because you wanna race down the path versus take a Sunday drive. And then you have to make some decision if it's optional, right? Can I afford this? Is this a luxury? Is it something that's gonna help me get to revenue generation faster? Understand why people and organizations are inside of your path as you start to do business inside the defense, security, and justice arena. I find a lot of times people don't understand what the role is of the different players in the room. And when you don't understand the roles of the players in the room, how can you then maximize your advantage to be able to go and actually conduct business? Because that's what you're trying to accomplish here, is conduct some business.
So now we're gonna open up the floor for like the next 5 minutes, and if anyone has any questions, we will answer them. Go ahead. If you
mentioned transaction vehicles. Could you elaborate more on types?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to assume no knowledge in the room, although I see some people that obviously have some expert level of knowledge. When you're looking for a transaction vehicle, really from a business perspective, you've got a couple of paths that you're going to go down. If I'm trying to accomplish business, I want to find a transaction vehicle that ideally is already under contract with me as a firm, that has scope and has ceiling. Right? Scope means that the work that I'm proposing can fit legally inside that contract vehicle. And ceiling means that there's amount of money available on that contract vehicle. And then if we can do that, and the government client can put a new task on that, that's ideal. Because then it comes directly, I can go quickly into the transaction mechanism, and then we can go to deliver. That's ideal. If you can't do that, and you have to go through either a FAR-based, a federal acquisition regulation-based contracting mechanism, maybe you're going to use other transaction authorities. Maybe it's a CSO from the Defense Innovation Unit, which I know we got brother coming up next to talk about that. So I would offer to you these transaction, it's just another fancy way of saying contract. And the contracts that are already let, so right now, let's talk real. It is July 28th, is that right? July 28th today? My former contracting officer to my left. At what point in August do contracting officers really look at you, even if the client walks in with $1 billion and says, I want to spend this by the end of August? At what point do you look at them and go, man, I got it. You found a client who had a problem, that's got budget, and even may have a transaction vehicle. But it's just too late in the fiscal year, which ends coming up, right?
You're probably already too late.
So,
right, Chase?
so again, you've got to put all of that together. So if you're right now in this process and you're like, oh, I've got money, I got a problem, I got a client, where's my transaction vehicle? If you're trying to start a new transaction vehicle at this point in the fiscal year,
Wah, wah, wah.
my experience has been it's pretty tough to do that.